Hi again, everyone. Today, Sadhguru shares amazing wisdom in a funny way, and that's what he does so well. So as we're on this path of infinite mind wealth together, if you find I'm too serious or you find others that don't work for you, go to this guy, go to Sadhguru. He has a humorous way of looking at things. So today he tells us to produce good movies in our mind. And I love that. Producing movies in our mind. That's what we do all the time with our thoughts. So think about it. What movies are you producing in your mind of yourself, of life around you? 99% of the time, the thing that holds us back is these movies, these horror movies, as Sadhguru says, these fear-based horror movies that 99% of the time are not happening. So start producing good movies in your mind. Produce a movie where you're the hero of your story and there's a happy ending. Visualize that. So again, that will make it a lot more fun as opposed to serious. Have a great day, everybody. Hi again, everyone. Today,
in celebration of my recent one-on-one video with Gary Vee's life coach, please enjoy this video from our vault.
You have to figure out as a person, as a business, how you communicate to the world. There are three ways: written word, audio, and video. Too many people are trying to do video when they're not capable of it. Too many people are not realizing written word is remarkable and they're getting caught up in pictures because Instagram's popping. So, the number one thing that would really matter to me as a data point is the following. I believe the more content that you put out, the more likely you'll be successful. I believe that you have to reverse engineer the end consumer, that you have to bring as much valuable content to them as possible. I think that you also need to eliminate friction between your message and the customer. What that means is you have to show up everywhere to the best of your ability in the way they want to consume it.
Most entrepreneurs never win on social media because you're not focused. You post everywhere, every now and then, with content that is below what you're capable of making. Chances are you wouldn't even subscribe to you on your own channels if you weren't you. If you wouldn't subscribe to you, you can't expect others to subscribe to you either. We're gonna fix that in this video. So I make all my content for me. I want to spread more belief in myself, and in doing that, I then share it with the world. And thankfully you guys watch it, you guys enjoy it, and I can build a business off of it. But even if nobody else liked it, I'd be making it just for myself so that I had the content, because this is my own personal development, professional growth series. And so I love learning from Gary. I love being around Gary. I love being around Steve. And well, we don't have a lot of content on AP Giannini, but I love being around, well, my parents don't have a YouTube channel either. Howard Schultz, Kanye. I love being around more successful people, mission-driven entrepreneurs who are trying to make a change in the world. When I'm around it, it pulls me up. It makes me want to do bigger things. And so I'm inspired by my own content. When I'm going to Instagram and I'm posting a story, part of my morning routine every morning is I post a story. If you see the black and white pictures, that's the current iteration right now. I'll take a picture of myself and I'll have a message on top of it. It'll say the day and then a message. That's a message for me. It's a message that I need to remind myself of. So just before doing the picture, I'll think, what do I need to do? It's not even about sharing. It's about, what do I want for myself? What do I need to remind myself of today? Right? What do I need to remind myself of today so that I show up, that I step up, that I don't coast, that I don't just take it easy, that I live to my potential today, right? Today matters. And so I'll make that message and share it. And then hopefully it touches and inspires other people as well. That's what's missing from so many people who are creating content. You're creating content that is, one, way too self-promotional. You're creating content that it barely speaks to yourself. And then you're just posting it and you feel crushed under the weight of having to manage all these different social media accounts and none of them doing well. And then you ask, why am I not growing? And why am I not getting followers? And why am I not getting the results that I need? So I'm a big believer in being able to have the accounts everywhere, but not actually being consistently posting everywhere, because I'd actually rather have you focus on one platform at a time, make it amazing, make it crush, start winning there before you expand and build a team and go to the other platforms. But at the core is you have to be posting content, whether it's videos, written, podcasts, right, audio, whatever the format is. You have to be posting content that you're proud of. You have to be posting content just like any other product or service. If you're selling a product or service, you want to be able to recommend it to your mom. If she had that problem, if she needed your product or service, you would recommend it to her because you believe in it so much, right? You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in what you're making. Not just because my one word is believe, but because it's actually important. So would you follow you? Are you proud of the work that you're putting up? Even though you know you're capable of more, yes, great, but are you proud of what you made? Was what you posted today the best of what you could do right now, given your current capabilities, resources, and skill set? Yes, awesome, keep going. No, work it, work harder. Today, show up. Now I've got a 3-step process that will guide you step by step to how to do it, but before that, if you want to boost your confidence, get more self-love and motivation, I've got a 254 series where every day for 254 days, I send you an email with a video that is unlisted on YouTube for free that helps you build your confidence, move it forward. The links to join are in the description below.
We are strong as shit. We're really strong. We're just being sold that we're not because there's a lot of money. The reason people aren't patient is they value other people's opinions too much. In a success world, please understand that success is happiness, not net dollars in.
Okay, let's talk about it. How do you build on social? What's my 3-step process? Let's dive in. Step number 1 is create accounts everywhere and listen. I want you to create an account on every platform. Create a Twitter, create a TikTok, create a YouTube, create a LinkedIn, create everything. Where a new platform pops up, create it. Especially if you have a competitive name, you want to create it so that you can have congruency across your accounts. You know, Evan Carmichael isn't that common a name, but there's an Evan Carmichael preacher in Hawaii who I pop in on his live streams every now and then. And when I like his content, his daughter thinks that he liked his own content, which is funny. But I'm Evan Carmichael and he's Evan.Carmichael, right? And there's other Evan_Carmichaels. And I try to get Evan Carmichael everywhere, right? So I can own the name. So do that for you, for your personal name or your brand name. Even if you never create content there, just so that you own the name in case you want to make content there, right? That's step 1. Part of that is then we're listening. So if you get tagged on Twitter, even though you might not have any content on Twitter, but if you get tagged, you can say thank you. Why I joined Twitter in the first place, Twitter at the beginning was people talking about their food and their pets, and I'm not gonna share that stuff. I don't care about that stuff. But some people were then typing Evan Carmichael and we're talking about me, we're talking about my website, and we're talking about my videos, and I wasn't a part of the conversation. By listening, and listen, you're not gonna get that many notifications, right? It's not like people are talking about you every single day. You get an email notification that people talked about you, and then you can go and respond and say thank you. So even if you never build your own Twitter audience, you have other people who are talking about you on Twitter. And if you just say thank you, you'll be one of the only people who ever even recognize their champions. Most people never even recognize, never say thank you, never give any kind of validation or acknowledgement. You're gonna be the person who does. It's not gonna take almost any of your time to do. And what does that do? It encourages them to share even more. So even if you never build up your Twitter platform, you've got other people who are active on Twitter sharing your message, promoting your brand. So you create your accounts everywhere, one, just to own the name, and then you're listening. If anybody mentions you, I'm not worried about posting content yet, we're just listening. If they mention you, you say thank you. Whether it's just a quick message, whether you do a video, you just say thank you and recognize your champions. That's step 1. Step 2 is you make your amazing 10-pack of content. So in my book, Built to Serve, if you don't have it, pick up Built to Serve, guys. It's a great book, you'll love it. I go through what I call the amazing 10-pack of content. And the idea here is it guides you step by step of how to tell your story. And the exercises are in the book, you can check it out. But basically think about your story, why you do what you do, some of your techniques that you've used to help you get out of the hole that you used to be in, 10 pieces of amazing content that you're proud of. And that's it. So step 2 is all you're creating is 10 pieces of amazing content that act as a brochure. that if somebody happened to find your page, that if somebody is tagging you, or it's coming from a newsletter, or they find you from your website, that there's at least something on there and it's content that you're proud of. It's not an ongoing content strategy. It's not I'm trying to attract more people into my ecosystem, that people will discover me on Twitter or on Instagram or on YouTube. But if people do find me, my story is there. There's context for people to be able to learn about me and hopefully help spread my message. So all you do as your second step is create your amazing 10-pack of content, and then you leave it. You create your picture, your bio, your 10 pieces of content, and then you don't touch the platform again, apart from listening to when people are talking about you. And then step number 3 is you're gonna pick one platform and match your skills to your audience. So what are you great at? What do you love doing? Do you love making videos? I love making videos. I love learning from videos. I love making videos. I started my channel 11 years ago because I wanted to have more visual content. I wanted to see videos of entrepreneurs and lessons from them. And there wasn't any of that content out there at the time. I don't use a podcast. I have a podcast with a friend of mine, Mark Drager. He runs the whole thing. I don't have my own podcast. People say, why don't you have your own podcast? Why don't you have the top 10s as a podcast? Because I don't listen to podcasts. I'm not in the podcast world. I don't enjoy podcasts. I love that people learn from podcasts, but I'm not in that world. So I want to make more videos. It's a combination of what I love doing with where there's an audience. Pick that platform for you. The platform that you probably where you're spending the most time on anyway. Where do you like spending most of your time? Are you on Twitter a lot? Are you on it as a consumer? Are you on Instagram a lot? Are you on Facebook? Are you on YouTube? Are you listening to podcasts? Like, where are you consuming the most? And then turn that into being a creator. And just focus on the one. Like, be a great YouTube creator. Be a great Instagram creator. Be a great Twitter creator. Just pick one that you already have familiar with the platform and be a creator there and start winning there and get results there. Make content there that you're proud of, that start feeding into your business so that you can afford to start hiring a team and scaling your company, and then start playing on the other platforms. I think people just try to go too broad from the beginning. They try to be everywhere, and then they end up posting garbage, and they're not proud of themselves, and they don't get any results. You're like, why am I getting results? Because you're posting stuff you're not proud of, that you wouldn't subscribe to you. So use those 3 steps, right? Step 1 again, get the accounts and listen for your champions and recognize and thank them. Step number 2 is just make your amazing 10-pack of content on those platforms. Picture, bio, 10 pieces of content, and stop. That's your brochure. And then step number 3 is figure out which platform you're gonna go all in on based on your skill set matching to the audience, and then dominate that, get some ROI, use it to build your business, hire the team to then expand to go off to the other platforms. Success, make it happen. Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, question of the day, I wanna know, what is the one platform for you? What is your one platform that you wanna spend more time on, that you're already consuming on? Maybe you're dabbling in creating, but you know you're gonna create more on. You're not gonna worry about everything else. The one platform that you're gonna stay consistent on and make amazing, great, insane, awesome content that when people see, they're gonna say, I love this person, I wanna subscribe to them. What platform is that for you? Let me know, put it down in the comments below. And if you're still here watching, you made it this far in the video, you're part of Believe Nation, and you are committing right here to make something happen today. We're not just watching a video. Good morning, Believe Nation. We don't just watch videos here, we do something. You're gonna take this energy and apply it into action in your life or business today. I wanna celebrate you right now. Give me a hashtag Believe down in the comments below.
You have to go out and find people who are successful financially and reverse engineer what they did. Reverse engineer, RE. I keep that little acronym in my head. It's one of the most powerful acronyms that you can remember. RE, reverse engineer. So, for example, when I was starting out, I was like, what would it take to become a millionaire? And I'd go, all right, win the lottery. A lot of people play the lottery. And some people, 1 or 2, become millionaires. But if you reverse engineer, I asked myself this one day, I started studying, what makes the most millionaires? What's made the most millionaires in the United States? Self-made, not people who inherited their money. And the answer is, ta-da, real estate. Now, you don't even have to be trying to make $1 million or become a millionaire, but just think about that. Reverse engineer that and put it into your life. It's not just about a career, but it's about also passive income, because your career is active income. You work on your career, you go to your job, even if you're an entrepreneur, right? But what about when you're asleep? Here's a crazy statistic. If you, just listen to this for a second. If you make what's minimum wage? Let's just say 15 bucks an hour. That's $30,000 a year, right? But what happens if you make $15 an hour 24/7? Okay? Now that's $90,000 a year. Triple it. But you can't work 24 hours a day. So that means you have to have this other thing called passive income. And passive income means, I lock myself in my own living room here. I'm gonna go out this way. I was filming over here. So what I started doing is going, I gotta have my active income, job, career, entrepreneurship, but I wanna reverse engineer the passive income that the most millionaires have ever, what has created the most millionaires ever, sorry. And that's real estate.
Evan, thank you so much for having a couple seconds and being able to tell the Believe Nation a little bit about Empathy Wines. It means a lot to me that you would take this valuable real estate and time on your channel to give me some love. It means a lot. It's just good karma points, and so you're awesome. Thank you. Believe Nation, if you're into wine at all, go to empathywines.com. My whole career's work was poured into producing a wine that rivaled $40 to $60 wine for 20 bucks a bottle. I'm just super excited about this subscription-based wine business. You can order 3, 6, or 12 bottles in subscription form, rosé, white, red. If you search on Instagram or Twitter, you will be blown away. People are literally like, I don't even like Gary Vee, but the wine's good. Super proud of the effort. Thanks, Evan, for the time. Wishing you guys all happy and healthy.
If you want to see my one-on-one with Gary Vee's life coach where she breaks me down, check the video on my main channel right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
80% of a human being's inner dialogue is negative. One of the things that human beings sucks at, besides dreaming, is the ability to keep promises to ourselves.
Morning, guys. I want to share with you today one thing that has changed everything in my life, and I know it can for you. We live in a world where one of the greatest challenges facing us is our mind health and how we can go from mind power to mind wealth. Once you make a decision, you find your one word and you make that determination to just go after your greatness, your true great self, you begin to control this. And that's the key to everything. So once you make a decision, doesn't matter whether, what state you're at in terms of, you want to fix it right away. No, just make the decision to go on the path. This thing locks in and you can go from drifting to living with definiteness of purpose, determination. I hope this helps everybody. Have a great day.
Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new episode of the Top 10 Rules of Success. Today, we'll learn from the richest man in modern history, Elon Musk, and how to learn anything you want, never get distracted, and solve big problems. Enjoy.
I think you really want to try to learn at every opportunity, and it's great to read books and talk to interesting people and learn as much as possible. I suppose it was Plato or someone who said, or maybe attributed to Socrates, if I know anything, it's that I know nothing. And so essentially, just taking that attitude that really we wish to be less bullish over time. But I think it's actually, if you accept the premise that you're a fool, then, which we are all a fool to some degree, then I think that, and you wish to be less bullish, then I think that's a good approach, and this avoids, that maximizes your feedback loop and your ability to learn. As soon as you start thinking you know too much, and people can't teach you things, that's when you start getting very dumb. I always try to learn new things, and being able to talk to interesting people, and you can often learn more by the questions that are asked than the answers that are given.
Rule number 2, don't get distracted.
Our primary goal is to create the technology necessary to get people to Mars, in the absence of which, it's somewhat academic. So we don't want to get too distracted from our primary mission of we got to make it at least possible to go to Mars, and we want to do so as soon as possible, and make access to Mars as widely available as possible, as affordable as possible, so that if somebody wants to go, they can. So that's our primary mission. There are many good causes in the world, but we got to be careful that we do not try to take on too many. There are many noble missions, but we have to pick our battles and say, okay, let's just make sure we get this done, because nobody else is doing it. And if SpaceX doesn't do it, I'm not sure how it will happen. I think this is at least right now, SpaceX is the only hope. So we've got to get this done, and it's far from done. We've got a long way to go. Starlink, in terms of providing internet connectivity to people that really don't have it, or it's very expensive, I think will be helpful in empowering a lot of people who are disempowered today. So I think that's a good thing too.
Rule number 3, be optimistic.
I'm generally of the view, philosophically, that it's better to be optimistic and wrong occasionally than pessimistic and right. I think you want to look on the bright side of things, and I'm a little worried that young people today maybe sometimes are a little pessimistic about the future. But I'd like to just assure people that as long as we are not complacent, we will solve the climate crisis, and we will solve these issues. We obviously need to take them seriously and work hard to solve them. They will be solved, and that people should be optimistic about the future and work to make that optimistic future real. They say that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so if you take the actions necessary for there to be a good future, then we will have a good future. So I'd encourage people to be optimistic, take the actions that will create a good future, and we will have one.
Rule number 4, create something fun.
What was going through your mind? How amazed were you to see your roadster up there with Starman just cruising along with the Blue Planet? And how long will we be getting live views, do you think, from the car?
Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible. And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly. We'd have way better CGI if it was fake. The colors all look kind of weird in space. There's no atmospheric occlusion. Everything looks too crisp. But we didn't really test any of those materials for, is it space hardened or whatever, So it just has the same seats that a normal car has. It's just literally a normal car in space, which I kind of like the absurdity of that. And if you look closely, on the dashboard, there's a tiny roadster with a tiny spaceman. So, because Hot Wheels made a Hot Wheels roadster, and a friend of mine suggested, hey, why don't you put that Hot Wheels roadster with a tiny spaceman on in the car too? I'm like, that'd be cool. Sure. So we did that. It's kind of silly and fun, but I think that's, silly fun things are important. And normally for a new rocket, they'd launch like a block of concrete or something like that. That's so boring. And I think that's just the imagery of it is something that's going to get people excited around the world. And it's still tripping me out. I mean, I'm tripping balls here.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, solve big problems.
I think AI safety is a really big deal. And we should have some regulatory agency that is overseeing AI safety. But there is not yet currently any such thing. And just generally any kind of regulatory agency done by the government will usually takes years to put in place. After the population collapse issue, I think AI safety is probably the second biggest threat to the future of civilization. Yeah, like I said, I'm not quite sure what to do with it. I mean, Tesla is arguably the world's biggest robot maker, because we have basically semi-autonomous cars that will ultimately be fully autonomous. And we are building a humanoid robot that will be basically like the car, but with legs. And I kind of held off on doing that for a while because, I certainly don't want to hasten the AI apocalypse. But clearly, if you look at Boston Dynamics and like those humanoid robots are going to happen. So they're either going to happen with or without Tesla. So it's like Tesla got a lot more ability to ensure robotics safety and AI. And I'll try my best to do that.
Rule number 6, be confident.
My question's about failure. So I was just wondering, what are you trying at the moment, or what do you think you'll attempt in the future that you're not expecting to succeed at?
Well, I think I'm going to stay on electric cars and rockets for a while. It was actually never my intent to run Tesla. Because running 2 companies is quite a burden, actually. Sometimes I run into people who think, oh, if you're CEO of the company, then they sort of imagine themselves, if they were CEO of the company, they would grant themselves lots of vacation and do lots of fun things. And it's like, that doesn't quite work that way. What you actually get is a distillation of the worst things going on in the company. It's like, anyway, so the idea of taking on something more is very frightening. Possibly at some point in the future, certainly not the near term, there are. I think there's an opportunity to create an electric jet, essentially. And I do think one could create an electric jet that is really exciting, something that would be supersonic, vertical takeoff and landing, pure electric, and just a big leap forward. I think that's a distinct. I'm quite confident it's doable, provided that there's a rough doubling of the energy density in batteries or capacitors. So, basically around the 500 watt-hours per kilogram level is where it starts to make sense. And then there's, I do think there's the possibility of kind of a 5th mode of transport, which I've talked about, kind of mentioned tangentially, which is like I call kind of the hyperloop. I'd like to sort of publish something about that maybe in the next month or two, once Tesla's at steady state production. And I want to flesh it out a little bit so that and pre-address some of the rebuttals that people will come up with, rather than just sort of put it out there and then have the rebuttal occur and have an unaddressed rebuttal. But I guess a way to think of it is it's like a cross between a Concorde and a railgun.
Rule number 7, seize new opportunities.
Suppose to be 20 years old right now, where would you start your path from?
I mean, if I was literally just, if I was just a 20-year-old right now in 2021, if I was 21 in 2021,
from where would you start?
Well, I mean, assuming that I'm still a technologist, then I think there's a lot of opportunity in synthetic RNA. The vaccines that were developed, apart from the ones that were done by BioNTech and Moderna, are really the beginning of what I call digital medicine, or medicine is software. And I think that's, I would say, what's the single biggest opportunity I see right now? It's probably synthetic RNA and the potential for revolutionizing medicine in that way. There's also artificial intelligence. There's one of my favorites which is tunnels. We need a lot of tunnels to address the traffic in major cities. And then there's obviously the continued electrification of transport with aircraft and boats, in addition to cars. Let's see. There's many other things that will come up as well. So I think we live at a very exciting time. If you look at the whole history of the world and humanity, this is a time of the greatest technological growth in history. And it seems to be accelerating.
Rule number 8, deploy advanced technology.
What is it that makes Starlink different to what's gone on in decades beforehand, Elon, but also with your new competition as well? What is it that makes you different?
Yes, well, when I gave a talk a few years ago about Starlink, I was asked for what's my goal for Starlink, and I said, well, our goal is not to go bankrupt. Because as you point out, every other low Earth orbit communications constellation ever done has gone bankrupt. Now, some of them have emerged from bankruptcy, but let's just say the original owners did not benefit from those constellations. So, they've either gone bankrupt after. Most of them went bankrupt before even deploying their constellation fully, and even the ones that did deploy their constellation, they still went bankrupt. Now they did subsequently emerge from bankruptcy, but and obviously companies like Iridium and Orbcomm are doing reasonably well today, but not for the original owners. So step number 1 for Starlink is don't go bankrupt. That is, and then if we succeed in not going bankrupt, then that'll be great, and we can move on from there. But I do think from a technology standpoint, Starlink is quite different from prior LEO constellations in that the technology that we're deploying is very advanced. What happens often with space-based technology, somewhat ironically, is that it tends to be older technology that exists on the ground. So companies generally have been very conservative, so they've said, well, we want technology that's proven to work on the ground, and then we have to test it for years to make sure it's going to work. in the vacuum of space with, a higher radiation load and that kind of thing. And so the technology that's generally been launched into orbit has been older technology. And we took the opposite approach and said, we're going to make technology that is, in some ways at least, more advanced than what is on the ground. And we're just going to take a chance. And so we have what's probably fair to say are the most sophisticated, the most advanced phased array technologies that, to the best of knowledge, no one has. It's not even at that sort of military level. It has this level of sophistication with phased array technology.
Rule number 9, be an innovator.
What did you learn? What did Falcon Heavy teach you?
Taught me like crazy things can come true. Because he'd said like, I didn't really think this would work. Because when I see the rocket lift off, I see like 1,000 things that could not work, and it's amazing when they do. And I was really seeing the two boosters land synchronized, really just like the simulation. It makes me think like there really could be quite a scalable approach. You could imagine large numbers of those just coming in, landing, taking off, landing, doing many flights per day. So I think it gives me a lot of faith for our next architecture, the sort of the interplanetary spaceship. You have different names for it, but BFR is kind of the code name. And it gives me confidence that BFR is really quite workable. But I was actually looking at the side boosters and like, they're pretty big, they're 16 stories tall, 60-foot leg span. But we need to be way bigger than that. So I think it's given me a lot of confidence that we can make the BFR design work. Yeah, it's. I have tremendous confidence, obviously, in the SpaceX team. So I think we can really do this a lot, and keep advancing the technology to achieve full and rapid reusability, which would have a profound effect on the future. And one of the interesting things about, say, Falcon Heavy versus Falcon 9 is that Falcon Heavy has the same level of expendability as Falcon 9. So if you look at, say, the price of Falcon 9 is $60 million, Falcon Heavy is 90, even though it's got 3 times as much capability. Because in both cases, the only thing that's expended is the upper stage. We're going to start recovering the fairings, the big nose cone. We're going to recover that, recover the boosters. And so there's really, the cost difference really between a Falcon 9 and a Falcon Heavy is minor.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have fun.
Hi. Hi. Hi.
Everybody, want to share with you a thought that has helped me so much in my life, and I hope it does the same for you. All the greats, all the wonderful thinkers, all the wonderful people that have accomplished amazing things have done this one thing. It is so clear and evident, and that is this: don't judge yourself. We are the worst enemies, our own worst enemies. For myself, all these years, I've been locked up in my own self-made prison, my thoughts of judging myself for mistakes that I've made, things that have happened. It is up to you. I want you to remember this as we go on this path of infinite mind wealth together, which I believe is the true path we're meant to be on. We're supposed to be imperfect. We're supposed to be forever imperfect. That's what allows the mistakes, and we can actually have fun with it. It's up to us. And so the biggest thing is, don't judge yourself. You make a mistake, great. Here's an opportunity to learn. Have a great day, everybody.
In fact, there's a much better way to maintain ongoing action toward a goal that also involves visualization, but it turns out it's not about visualizing success, it's about visualizing failure. The Balcetis lab and other labs have looked at whether or not people make progress toward goals of different types, whether or not they're thinking about the goal, they're thinking about that goal line and what they want to achieve, that long-term goal and all the wonderful things associated with it, or whether or not they're thinking about all the ways in which they could fail en route to that goal. Right? This is not typically what we are encouraged to do. Typically, we are told, don't imagine failure, push failure out of your mind, only focus on success, fake it till you make it, or is a phrase that I absolutely hate, frankly, because it's not even clear what that means, and it's not even clear what the ethical form of that is. I think it means continue despite any anxiety or fear that things won't work out. But if you look at the literature, the scientific literature, what the Balcetis lab and other labs have shown is that there's a near doubling in the probability of reaching one's goal if you focus routinely on foreshadowing failure. You think about the ways in which things could fail if you take action A or you take action B, and instead, therefore, you take action C. You're supposed to think about how things could fail if you don't get up and run each morning if your goal is, say, a fitness goal. So let's use that as an example, because even though I realize people are in pursuit of many things, not just fitness goals and physical goals are a very concrete thing that we can all get on the same page about because they're related to actions. Let's say somebody sets a goal of running 5 miles 4 times a week minimum and as many as 7 4 times a week minimum before 8 a.m. Okay, in a previous podcast on habits, I talked about the benefits of not necessarily setting specific times that one will do things, but setting time blocks that one will do things. So you say before 8 a.m., you're going to run 5 miles, and that's going to happen up to 7 days a week. Okay, one version of this would be, okay, sit back in a chair and think about how great you're going to feel and look if you're doing this every day, how your health is going to improve, how everything's going to, your blood markers of lipids, et cetera, are going to improve. Okay, fine. That's the visualization goal of visualizing the endpoint. Turns out that is far less effective and maybe even counterproductive compared to thinking about what's going to happen if you don't do this. The negative health outcomes that are going to occur, the disappointment you're going to have in yourself, the fact that you're going to wait until 7:30. That's not long enough for many people to run 5 miles. You go to put it on your shoes, it's going to be pouring rain or even hailing or snowing outside, and now you're not going outside unless you're somebody who's particularly motivated to do that. Okay, so foreshadowing failure turns out to be the best way to motivate toward goal pursuit. In fact, as I mentioned before, there's a near doubling in the likelihood that people will reach goals of any kind when they're constantly thinking about how bad it's going to be if they fail. If we think back to the neural circuit associated with assessing value in our goal pursuits, this makes perfect sense. The amygdala, that center of the brain that's involved in anxiety and fear and worry, well, the amygdala is one of the 4 core components of our goal setting and goal pursuit circuitry. And there's no bypassing that. There is no one listening to this or watching this whose amygdala is not involved in their goal setting and goal pursuit behavior. And so while I'd love to be able to tell you that all you should think about is rainbows and puppies and all the wonderful, rewarding things that are going to happen when you achieve your goals, the truth is you should be thinking mainly about how bad it's really going to get if you don't do it, how disappointed in yourself you're going to feel, how it will negatively impact you, if not in the immediate term, in the long term, if indeed your goal is to reach your goal. So I want to emphasize that I'm not interested in encouraging people to flagellate themselves. I'm encouraging people to achieve their goals. And it turns out the best way to do that is by foreshadowing failure. And the more specific you can get by writing down or thinking about or talking about how bad it will be if you don't achieve your goals, the more likely you are to achieve those goals.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more. And you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Dr. Andrew Huberman, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, listen to your gut.
I really believe that we all have some superpower that reflects, maybe this is a bit of a scientific explanation, that reflects the fact that our biology is tilted in some direction. people often think about their biology being tilted in a direction that doesn't serve them, like, oh, my parents were this, and or I'm not a good athlete, or I'm whatever. But it's also tilted in the direction of something really special. So like when I was a kid of that age, I was fascinated by animals. I was just like and so had I learned to listen to that more, I used to hide my interest in animals because I thought it was kind of it wasn't cool. Like I didn't play the guitar in college, I didn't surf. I was like I can tell you all these facts about mustelids and ferrets, like what good is that? But but I think that kind of leaning, that kind of tilt towards like that's me, like you resonate with something. And I'm not the first to say this. I think Robert Greene also said this, like adults will often remember back to a time where they interacted with something. Sometimes it's an object or sometimes it's an experience, and it just felt so good, like it kind of drew you in. I would tell your young listeners and viewers to really pay attention to that. It can seem almost trivial, like it's rarely about the thing you're looking at or the thing you're doing, but sometimes it's the sensation of running. Sometimes it's the sensation of seeing something or hearing something, because there's a hint there, and it's not really about what you're looking at or you're doing. It's that feeling. Like that feeling is your compass. Like that's your true north, because that's the feeling you want to get to find the mate for your life, the partner for your life, the career track. And over time you're going to pivot, right? I mean, you're not going to get it on the first try. My story of science started there. It told me right there. I felt it in that conversation with my dad, and then my compass was all over the place and spinning, and eventually it's come back. I found it. But get in touch with that feeling. And if this seems at all abstract, I would do it as an experiment. I would sit in a chair and I would think about something you don't like really don't like, and I would pay attention to what that feels like in your mind and in your body. I'm not a very somatic person. I'm not somebody who feels stuff at the level of the body. I've always felt like my emotions were in my head. So when people talk about their emotions in their other places, I'm just I don't get it. But I would encourage them to think about that, and then I would encourage them to think about something they really like. It could be roller coasters, could be music, could be, get specific and to get in touch with that feeling. And that feeling is your guide. Yeah. That feeling is your compass, because the nervous system, it's not mystical. The nervous system will orient toward the things that it's best equipped to do. It really will. And animals do this naturally. My bulldog Costello never tries to be a different kind of dog. He never fetched once. First time I threw the ball, he walked to the ball, he sat down with the ball, he destroyed the ball, because that's what bulldogs do. Throw it to a retriever, they bring it back, because the brain of the retriever is wired to feel good by retrieving. Yeah. And the brain of the bulldog is good to feel good by being horizontal and pulling on things they like to tug. So I think humans, we're similar enough, but we're different in the sense that you have something installed in you that feels right. And getting in touch with that feeling is key. And I should tell that you're not going to get it right away. This is a practice you learn, like shooting basketballs or math. You do it over and over but if you get started young at 8 or 9, oh my goodness, great. And if you do it when you're 12, or even if you're 60 and you do this, you'll find that pretty soon you start steering in these directions. And I do believe it's a nervous, it's a neural, there's a real physical substrate for this. It's not mysticism.
Rule number 3, expand your vision.
Both those things, breathing and vision, also run in reverse, meaning if we change our pattern of breathing, we change our inner state. If our state changes, our breathing changes. So it's reciprocal, it's bidirectional. Likewise with vision, when we are excited or stressed, the aperture of our visual window shrinks. We get that soda straw view of the world. When we are relaxed, the aperture of our vision expands. But as well, it runs in both directions. If we expand our view of the world, literally force our visual field, or it's very easy actually. You can do it no matter where you are right now. If you just try and expand your visual field, not by looking around or moving your head or eyes, but by trying to see yourself in the environment that you're in. So you literally dilate your view so you could see the ceiling and the floor and the walls if you're inside, or if you're outdoors, seeing as big an aperture of your visual field or your visual environment as possible.
So you're directing your attention to, even though you might remain looking straight ahead, you're just directing your attention to as wide a peripheral view, horizontally and vertically as possible. Is that what you mean?
That's right. Exactly. So essentially, if you keep your head and eyes mostly stationary, you don't have to be, rigid about rock steady. But if you look forward and you expand your field of view, so you kind of relax your eyes so that you can see as much of your environment around you as possible, to the point where you can see yourself in that environment. What you do is you are turning off the attentional and, believe it or not, the stress mechanisms that drive your internal state towards stress. This is why when you go to a vista or you view a horizon, it's very relaxing, because you naturally go into panoramic vision. When you are indoors, you're looking at your phone, you're looking at a computer or a camera or something of that sort, or you're talking to somebody or an intense conversation, you may not notice it, but your entire visual field shrinks to a much smaller aperture. And that drives an increase in alertness in internal state. And we sometimes call that stress if it's a negative experience. If it's a positive experience, we might call that love or obsession or fascination. But the important thing to realize is that both vision and breathing have a profound and very rapid effect on our internal state of mind and body, and it runs in both directions. Our internal state that could be triggered by a text message or hearing something that somebody says drives changes in our breathing and our vision, but our breathing and our vision can also drive changes in our internal state. And so that article in Scientific American was a discussion about how we can leverage the visual system and the respiration, the breathing system, in order to take control over our internal state. Because it's not just that 2020 was stressful, it's that our internal state determines everything. It doesn't just determine if we feel like we're having a hard time falling asleep or we're having a hard time focusing, for instance. It also determines how we batch time, how we analyze where we are in the world in terms of our lifespan. A good example of this would be when we are very stressed, we fine slice time. This is why when people are in a car accident or something, they might report that things were in slow motion. They're actually, your frame rate increases. Whereas when you're very relaxed, your frame rate slows down. And when we are relaxed, we get so-called perspective. We are able to say, well, this too shall pass, or I can place this stressful event in a context. So one thing that's just fundamental to how our nervous system works is that we are constantly placing our experience, both our immediate and past experience, as well as our anticipation of the future, into some sort of larger context. And our visual system, literally how we are viewing the world at that moment, dictates how we create perspective in terms of states of mind. Sounds a little bit abstract, but it's actually, it boils right down to optics of the eye and very concrete things like how you move your eyes and how you view the world.
Rule number 4, control your dopamine.
How do you get motivated? Well, one way to do that is if you are good at subjectively attaching dopamine to the pursuit, just knowing, okay, I really am hungry for this. I'm going to tell myself that, making it 1% of the way is a success, and I'm going to keep going and I'm going to keep ratcheting on. And that's great if you can do that. But for people that can't do that, understanding this relationship with the pleasure-pain balance can be more powerful. Just understanding the more friction and pain that you experience, the greater the dopamine reward you will get later. And that serves as its own amplifier of the whole process of pursuing more dopamine. And then the other aspect of it is that anytime that we're leaning into action, it has the possibility of being an amplifying process or a depleting process. And the key to that is making sure that you're balancing the dopamine and epinephrine systems. Epinephrine being this molecule of universal currency of energy output. It could be out of hate or it could be out of love. Epinephrine doesn't care. And actually dopamine doesn't care. None of these systems care about us. They just work underneath our conscious control. But when you start to understand that hitting the gas pedal is great, but hitting the gas pedal and then coming off the gas pedal a little bit, you can kind of sit in a more relaxed RPM, actually allows you to go much further. I think that people leaning into action is terrific. I always say you can either be back on your heels, flat-footed, or forward center of mass. The best situation is actually to be right upright, but just know that you can be forward center of mass at any point. And to take it back to sex and reproduction, because it's a salient example, the arc of sex is very interesting because when you think about autonomic arousal, it turns out that the arousal stage of sex actually involves release of dopamine, but is what we call parasympathetic dominant. It actually has to be relaxed enough in order to occur. Okay, everyone can read between the lines on this. Orgasm is actually I don't want to say full blown. It is a sympathetic nervous system driven response. It's identical to the stress system. It's driven by the same neural circuits as stress. That's so weird. And then what comes afterward? The parasympathetic system goes back up again. It's that deep relaxation. So why do I say this? Not to talk about sex to be, to serve as a highlighter, but rather our species arrived here because of this dance between arousal and relaxation, And one thing we can say for sure about every human being that's alive now is that their parents, at least once, mastered this dance of relaxed and excited, but not too excited, then really excited, and then relaxed. That dance was mastered by all of our parents, and that's what delivered us here to some extent. And so what this means is that all the neural circuits, from the ones that led to our conception to the ones that lead to us pursuing goals, have this balance. There's almost like a seesaw, right? There's activation and calm, and it's that dynamic process that's important to master in every endeavor. So we use sex as an example, but in pursuit of goals, you have to learn how to pursue short-term goals, and like the goals within the day, make a cup of coffee, and long-term goals. And when I said dopamine is what's setting your time perception, it's an interval timer. What you're saying is, it's like the 2 marshmallow experiment done at Stanford. Defer the dopamine, and actually, if you can, turn the waiting into the dopamine, and then you can extend out the reward for, waiting for the second marshmallow 15 minutes later, et cetera, et cetera. And there are many, many examples of this in the psychology and neuroscience literature. And I would say finally, in 2020, we finally as a field got a clear idea of how dopamine is really working. Because before it was all about work, dopamine hit, right? Sex gives you a dopamine hit. The internet gives you a dopamine hit. What we didn't realize is that repeated engagement with these things leads to dopamine depletion, and that the pain and pleasure balance is always at work.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
Rule number 5, be optimistic.
That beliefs are attached to a set of rewards.
Interesting.
So now the dopamine system is exceedingly powerful because dopamine is a kind of a dumb molecule. It has no brain of its own. It's just a molecule, right? It's just a chemical. But when dopamine is released in our brain, first of all, it tends to orient us towards goals in the outside environment. It's the molecule not just of reward, but of motivation. And when we release dopamine, we tend to see the world in terms of external goals. And so you can imagine now if there's a process built up inside us where our thoughts are causing dopamine release, and dopamine is shaping what we see as rewards, what we perceive as rewards. That can be wonderful or terrible, depending on how that's harnessed.
So let me understand this. When we have dopamine triggered in our body, because it's attached to some type of belief, we're going to continue to say, this feels good.
That's right.
So let me keep thinking this way.
And viewing the world this way.
In this way, because it's going to keep making me feel good.
That's right.
Physically.
That's right.
Wow. Even if it's fact or not fact, scientifically true or not true.
Or harmful to other people, or harmful to yourself.
If it makes you feel good, you might stick to that belief.
That's right. So a good example with dopamine is, with anytime thinking about science and neuroscience in particular, thinking at the extremes can be kind of useful. So people who are very depressed who see no possibility in the world. Who, if you talk to a depressed person, every response they give is going to be, but it's not going to work out.
It doesn't
They
work for
are
me,
absolutely certain that things are going to turn out bad.
And there's a benefit for having that belief,
and
right?
they're entrenched in it. They may actually be rewarding that somewhat, although typically depressed states have very low dopamine. At the opposite extreme is mania. When people are in a manic phase, dopamine is very high, we know this, and they see possibility everywhere, and there's certain things are going to work out. They will spend money they don't have, they'll create relationships they don't have time and energy for, they will overdo everything. And so somewhere in the middle is this healthy range where where we realize that how we view the world is shaping the release of these chemicals. And I do believe this happens when we have positive thoughts. We get a lift. If we can get a lift from our positive thoughts, and then dopamine itself puts us in relationship with the outside world such that we view the outside world as having more possibility, that is going to put us into forward momentum. There are a lot of studies to support that. When dopamine is low, we tend to see very little possibility in the world. And
so a positive thought triggers forward movement, potentially.
Yes. Yeah.
So positive thinking, which a lot of people will say, well, that's just positive thinking, it doesn't work. Some people say, well, be positive, think positive. Others say, well, it doesn't work. Well, with science, I'm hearing you say it gives you a little bit of a lift.
Absolutely. The key with positive thinking is that it has to be honest. It can't be, I've already won, I don't have an Olympic gold medal. If I could tell myself I'm going to get one tomorrow, but I just don't have the skills. So that's not going to release dopamine in my system.
How do you know it's honest if you're in a depressed state and you don't believe that you are actually better off than where you're at?
The key is to attach so one thing to understand is that dopamine release in the brain is always subjective. There's no experience that says, that has unique domain over dopamine release, that will only allow dopamine release. So if it's very subjective. So if I say to myself, I'm going to get into the process of doing something. We have a new year coming up, so there's going to be a lot of resolutions soon. It's not if you attach the dopamine release to the process of effort or goal setting itself, you'll have more energy to be in effort. And then if you can attach dopamine release to the belief that you're at least heading in the right direction, you'll have more energy to keep going in the right direction. People make the mistake of thinking that the positive thought process should be attached to the finish line. It's not about thinking you've already won. It's not about being delusional. It's about thinking that your training is going to take you to the finish line. And so it's about moving that mental horizon in more closely, and then triggering some sort of positive internal representation of what you're doing, meaning thinking positive. And people, this is usually where I get stopped and people say, wait, but it sounds so subjective. Tell me exactly how to do it. But here's the key point. It's supposed to be subjective. This
for you, right?
Everyone needs to figure out what allows them to continue to be in forward momentum, what allows them to constrain the world of possibilities and to go after goals, and how often to self-reward. But the key is the self-word, because if you start only pursuing external rewards, that's when you are no longer in control of your dopamine system.
Because you're reliant on actually something physically happening in the physical world, not internal.
That's
reward.
right. And let's be really, really honest and burst the bubble that I feel like should have been burst a long time ago, which is, yes, everybody, including me, it is possible that you can do everything and still fail. No one wants to say that. But the way that you ensure against that is to attach reward to the effort process. Because the dopamine molecule creates a sense of certainty, and you're not trying to create certainty about the final outcome. You're trying to create certainty only about the next outcome that's en route to the final outcome.
The next action outcome.
So you want to think about milestones.
Yes.
And so people set out with, I'm gonna write the great American novel, or I'm going to get the IPO. And of course, that's an important, you need to have a sense of what the finish line would actually look like. But the more that one can attach this subjective release of dopamine process to the intermediate steps through positive thinking and action, the higher that probability goes toward, in science we say there's a probability of 0 to 1. The higher that probability goes to 1, which is certainty. Now, Everyone knows in the back of their mind that there is no absolute certainty. When I hear about, athletes or fighters, I was certain I was going to win. We all know that there's a 0.00000 doubt in everybody.
Right.
0.00, whatever that is. Now, for some people, they might be able to push that number way, way out. But certainty about outcome is actually a form of delusion. Certainty
it's
about
like a mania, yeah.
That's right. That's right. You see this in mania, and that's why people start engaging in behaviors that aren't good.
Fixated on this is going to happen.
That's right. The silver lining in this is that when you create certainty about outcomes you know you can control, you take over this neurobiological system, and you create almost certainty that you will complete the process to the end goal perfectly.
Rule number 6, balance pain and pleasure.
Understanding that pain and pleasure are in this really dynamic balance can also help us, which in the following way. Any pain that you feel, the longer day, the less sleep, the kind of agony that things aren't working, that power outlet doesn't work, or the internet is slow, whatever it is, the amount of pleasure that you will eventually experience is directly related, to how much pain you experience. So we know this from actually what nowadays would be considered quite barbaric and unethical experiments, where they would give people electrical shocks and they would measure their response. And then they'd say, we're going to increase it. Eventually they get to the point where a shock that was previously very painful actually evokes a sense of pleasure. Now, you couldn't do these experiments anymore. These are not the experiments I do in my lab. These are older experiments. But for instance, and this has been discussed in scientific research papers, giving somebody a 10-minute ice bath, for instance, or even a 3-minute ice bath, or a 1-minute ice bath is quite painful. But there was a study from the University of Prague, European Journal of Physiology, showed that after a painful ice bath stimulus, the amount of dopamine release goes up for 2.5 hours to 250% above baseline. And that's not because the ice bath itself evokes dopamine release. A lot of people think, cold water evokes dopamine release. No, pain evokes dopamine release after the pain is over. Yesterday, I tweaked my back because I do this stupid thing every few years, the same stupid thing, and it's really painful. And then you just remember all the ways in which you can't move around. I was standing up this morning, I'm and just walking is so painful. As the pain has started to dissipate, you get a little bit of a high, right? You get a little bit of a euphoria. That's dopamine, because of the degree of pain that you experienced previously predicts how much pleasure. So when you start a company down in the dregs and you're shoveling again, that's beautiful, because that means that the win that you achieve is going to be as good or greater than the one you had previously, in your case with Quest. And so we go back to this example of the person that's not motivated, that can't get off the couch, that doesn't want to do anything. Well, this is the problem. Remember the rat experiment? They are effectively the rat with no dopamine, but they can still achieve some sense of pleasure by consuming excess calories, by consuming social media. And look, I'm not judging, I do this stuff too, right? Scrolling social media. If you've ever scrolled social media and you're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. It doesn't really feel that good. And I can remember a time where you'd see something that was just so cool, or you'd see something online. I remember this when TED Talks first came out. I was like, this is amazing. These are some, at least some of them are really smart people sharing really cool insights. And then now that there are like a gazillion TED Talks, I remember spending a winter in my office when I was a junior professor, cleaning my office finally, and binging TED Talks in the background, thinking this is a good use of my time. Pretty soon, they all sucked to me. I was like, this isn't good. So what you need to do is stop watching TED Talks for a while, wait, and then they become interesting again. And that's this pain-pleasure balance. And so for people that aren't feeling motivated, the problem is they're not motivated, but they're getting just enough or excess sustenance. So they're getting the little mild hits of opioid. It becomes an opioid system. And if you think about the opioid drugs as opposed to dopaminergic drugs make people rabid for everything. Drugs of abuse like cocaine and amphetamine make people incredibly outward directed. Right? They hardly notice anything except what they want more of, more. It's bad, because those drugs trigger so much dopamine release that they become the reward. It's very circular. Only the drug can give that much dopamine. Nothing they could pursue would give them as much dopamine as the drug itself. So there's that. And then there's the kind of opioid-like effects of constantly indulging oneself with social media or with video games or with with food or with anything to the point where it no longer evokes the motivation and craving. And this is really the new evolution of the understanding of dopamine in neuroscience, which is that dopamine itself is not the reward. It's the buildup to the reward. And the reward has more of a kind of opioid bliss-like property, which itself is not bad if it's endogenous, released from within. But when we can just sit there like the rat with no dopamine, gorging ourselves with pleasures, so to speak, what you end up with is somebody that feels really unmotivated, and those pleasures no longer work to tickle those feel-good circuits. And so there's no reason for them to go out and pursue anything. And that's a pretty dark picture. So the keys are to pursue rewards, but understand that the pursuit is actually the reward if you want to have repeated wins, okay? The celebration has to be less than the pursuit. And that's hard for some people to do. It's got to be that your celebration is slightly less dopaminergic. It can be very reflective. You can be in gratitude. Those are other neurotransmitter systems, but you don't want to be on that high as you celebrate the win. You want to be trickling out your dopamine regularly until you pursue things.
Rule number 7, avoid distractions.
Previously, I told you that it's great to foreshadow failure, that's a great way to get your system into a state of activation. I also told you that you want to set goals that are challenging but possible. And again, here I'm paraphrasing from the work of Emily Balcetis. I want to be very clear. There are a few other things that one can do in order to bias the likelihood that you will succeed in trying to achieve your goals. First of all, limit your options. Trying to pursue too many goals at once can definitely be counterproductive. Now, I realize that life is complicated. We all have multiple goals that we're trying to pursue. But if we have particular goals that are important to us, we have to be careful to not get distracted by other goals. And many people run into this problem. So setting 1 or 2 or maybe 3 major goals for a given year is going to be more than enough for most people and is actually going to be challenging for most people. Now, of course, we have daily goals and monthly goals and yearly goals. But if we have big, lofty goals, we need to be careful not to contaminate our mental space and our visual space with too many goals. And why do I say visual goals? Well, what various department stores and supermarkets have discovered is that the greater the number of things in our visual attention, the more that we can draw our attention and our goals off a line of pursuit. What does that mean? Well, let's think about it in the practical context. This has actually been done. Big department stores have figured out that if they stock their shelves chock-a-block with many, many options of food or clothing items or objects or anything like that, people simply buy more stuff. People are very prone to orienting their attention to whatever's in front of them. You put a lot of stuff in front of them, their attention drifts. You put fewer things in front of them, their attention is more narrow. In a later episode, we'll talk about designing a workspace that's optimized on the basis of this. It doesn't mean being in a room with nothing except just your desk and a computer. It doesn't have to be that sparse, but visual sparseness actually can help us orient our focus and our behavior. When we have a lot of things in our visual environment or a lot of things in our cognitive environment, it's the same thing. And so if you're going to try and pursue a fitness goal, a relationship goal, an academic goal, and a long-term life financial goal all at once, that's 4 things. And you're going to have to come up with systems that allow you to isolate those goals in a very rigid way.
Rule number 8, raise your alertness.
If you want to learn and change your brain as an adult, there has to be a high level of focus and engagement. There's absolutely no way around this because so focus and intensity and that kind of the Goggins phenotype, right? I think Goggins is now a noun, a verb, and a pronoun, right? It's like, it's amazing. So if you're going to Goggins this process, what you need to do is you need to, regardless of how agitated you feel, you have to lean in and focus extremely hard. Now, the reason for that is that there's a neurochemical, norepinephrine, also called adrenaline, same thing, that's released in the brain and body. Most people back off at that point because they feel this agitation. But we have to remember that that noradrenaline was designed to get us into movement. That's the purpose of noradrenaline, to take us out of stillness and into movement. And then the other thing we have to do is we have to take that elevated level of alertness and we have to focus it. And there's a second neuromodulator called acetylcholine, which is secreted from this little structure in the base of the forebrain when we visually focus on something. Or in the case of maybe if you're doing auditory learning, when you focus with your auditory attention. Neuroplasticity is triggered when urgency and focus combine. Acetylcholine is released for the aficionados out there, it's called the nucleus basalis, but that doesn't matter. There's a little compartment of neurons in the base of your forebrain that doesn't like to release acetylcholine on a regular basis. It's greedy. It's greedy, and it doesn't want to use that. If you're a child, it'll drain your brain with acetylcholine. But as an adult, 30, 40, up to 8.
Why is that?
Because Mother Nature designed us to learn what we need to learn and then do that, reproduce and die. I mean, not to be how rude, dark about it, but I would say evolution is not about us; it's about the offspring.
Yes,
right? 100%.
And then it's not even about them; it's about their offspring.
Exactly,
never ends.
We are being manipulated from the inside.
Yes,
I mean that's what it kind of drew me in neurobiology, is that all these complex things you see in the world, it's all internal. So, if you get urgency, it can come from. Let's use David he's a shining example of this, right? You can sit there and just ramp up your level of urgency through purely psychological means. You could take an ice bath. You could do high intensity breathing, anything that brings your level of alertness up.
Rule number 9, play with intense focus.
There are other things that if it's a physical skill that you're trying to learn, as opposed to just a mental skill, then there's a whole kingdom of things that are fun. For instance, if it's a physical skill, you want to generate as many repetitions as you safely can per unit time. So if you say, I'm going to learn dance, you want
use a ball machine if you're playing tennis.
Exactly. You literally want to generate repetitions, and in particular, you want to generate failures. Every time you give a bad serve playing tennis, that activates the circuits for focus and alertness for the next attempt.
Yeah, it's true.
That's right.
Especially when you're losing.
That's right. And a lot of people don't like failures, and so they back away from it. So remember, the nervous system will only change if you give it a reason to do that. And the other one that's kind of an interesting twist on this is the way the nervous system is wired is it wants to pass off all of its work to circuits that are reflexive as much as it can. You don't think about walking anymore because you learned how to walk, but when you were learning, you were very focused on it. One of the things that can set the stage for more plasticity overall is when you disrupt the vestibular or the balance system. It does appear that whenever we are physically off balance, the brain is primed to pay attention, and the chemical milieu is such that it can actually rewire itself faster. And whereas I think the 90s and 2000s brought out a lot of important work on saying, hey, exercise of aerobic type or maybe even weight training can create neuroplasticity. That was great, but it wasn't directed enough. It didn't say, well, what kind of exercise?
Yeah.
And what will get me even more plasticity? And so there are some basal things about heart rate and blood flow, et cetera, but anything that involves balance or coordination, it's incredible how fast the brain can learn. So things like dance, martial arts, a real sport, not just exercising. And I'm not, no disrespect to the I'm more of just an exerciser than a sport guy. But if you're 40, 50, 60, 80, whatever, learning a new physical skill, we know is tremendously powerful for opening up neuroplasticity broadly. So some people will even leverage this where after they finish some physical skill learning or something, they might take a 20-minute nap, and then they might read, or they might try something. So when we see these people,
I've been learning surfing. I'm like 60 years old.
Well, perfect, the vestibular.
And I'm like,
exactly.
I started learning tennis when I was 45, and it's really a challenge because it's not automatic, and I have to really focus and be present.
Well, these individual cases are not necessarily the place to hang our hat completely. But for instance, the great physicist Richard Feynman, he was well known for learning bongo drums in the it was in the 60s, but in his 60s, then he became a quite accomplished painter later in life. And his whole thing was approach all of these things from a standpoint of play with intense focus.
Yeah.
And I think the play element is key because the play element keeps the agitation in check. So that when you're stepping on your partner's feet, trying to learn how to dance, or you're failing miserably, frustration is a real thing. And so I think that the element of playfulness, some people call it beginner's mind, but I think that should be the anchor point to return to. And people that maintain curiosity, or I should say that cultivate curiosity, and that cultivate a sense of play and willingness to take on new vestibular experiences of all things, they show remarkable plasticity into their late life. And I think that it all comes back to this thing that the brain won't change unless something changes in the weather of the brain. The overall milieu has to say, oh wait, everything that's about to happen is different.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would it change?
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is just keep going.
There are other goals that are very different. Last time we talked, you were learning Spanish.
Yeah,
right?
still learning.
Yeah, great.
Still learning.
And there's a little bit more friction there because it
Very
takes
challenging.
It takes more effort to lean in because when you don't already know how to do something, it's a very different goal pursuit. Right? Sort of like
so if I already have my business and I've been running it for a few years, you know certain practices of how to get to where you've been.
That's right.
And you're thinking, how do I double my business?
That's right.
It's different than I'm trying to learn a whole new skill goal.
Right. You already know how to forage for water,
Yes.
as opposed to you're some young calf or some animal that needs to learn how to walk to
survive,
go live.
yeah.
Right. So I think, one big goal of the sort that we don't actually have the skill set yet, or we're not even aware of what we need in order to accomplish it per year seems like a pretty good goal to me. So learning an entirely new language or an entirely new physical skill. But with any long-term goal, the problem is,
don't focus on the destination.
That's right. Well, so you have to move the horizon in, but you have to remember there's that one little pitfall, that cul-de-sac that I described, where you'll tell people, this year I'm going to do blank, and if they reward you enough, you might not do it. Remember, if you get enough dopamine...
That's amazing. I'm so happy you're doing that.
That's
Congratulations.
Right. And you say, I know I can do it, and then you sort of lose the incentive to do it. So a lot's been made out of making goals public.
Is it better to make them public or not?
Well, so this is a question. I don't know. I think that in my case, it has. For me, telling several people that I'm going to do something, because I will work very hard to avoid
humiliation,
the shame and disappointment.
Yeah.
But I tend to do that with things I really want to do anyway, but there's a strong fear element. Like I'm afraid to do this, or I'm kind of anxious about doing this. So I'll tell people, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm committed.
Yeah.
I got to do this.
You got to do it now.
And I tell people that I'm certain are going to give me a hard time.
Yeah.
That's just my nature.
Right.
And I'm not trying to prove them wrong. I'm just trying to make sure that they don't have any ground to stand on.
Yeah.
And that's how I do it. I think for some people, the continuation of what they're already doing, if it's feeling like a lot of work, it's feeling exceedingly challenging, and they're like, oh my God, another year of this, another 5 years of that. I think that's when you have to move the horizon in really close. I think a lot of people right now are feeling back on their heels because 2020 was such a trying year for a lot of people. So many people are recalibrating what's possible. Although many people are feeling expansion and they're really going to go forward full steam. So I think continuing in pursuits that we already have some degree of mastery over, and thinking about where could I notch that up another 2 or 3%, I think that's incredibly valuable. I think that provides a lot of value to the individual, to their families, and to society, really, because a 2% improvement of like what you're already doing is going to have an outsized effect on what other people receive, right? Even though for you've been down that road many times. But taking on a new pursuit in parallel to that means really getting excited about the possibility. You give the Jim Carrey example, about the possibility, and starting to imagine what that would actually be like to be, well, let's say fluent in Spanish, and you can just do this reflexively without having to try. That's totally within your reach. And I think there it makes sense to really think about the end point quite a lot as a way to get over those barriers of fear. Because when you already know how to do something, there's no fear barrier.
Yeah.
It's just an energy barrier.
Right.
But when you don't know how to do something, there's all this sense of clunkiness that is really uncomfortable. Beginner's mind is a painful place. Let's be honest.
Hard, man.
A lot of people think about it like beginner's mind is such a delightful place to be.
It's so hard. The friction, the amount of energy to build momentum is so challenging in the beginning.
Well, this is where play becomes very important.
You need play.
The great physicist, Richard Feynman was also famous, in addition to being a physics phenom, for having this sense of play. He learned to bongo drum late in life. He became an artist late in life, and he had this lightness and this kind of joyful way to approach things. Humor at oneself is incredibly powerful. Now we know the chemical basis for that. Laughing at oneself is often the best way to move forward.
Really?
Yeah, because I do this, well, maybe I'm biased, but I do this all the time. I'll just laugh at myself for how worked up I can get about the fact that a file won't load or something like that. And I just laugh. It's crazy. And all of a sudden I have the energy to do it.
So what does that do for our brain when we laugh at ourselves? But there's probably a difference between laughing at ourselves or something like that versus making fun of something that's a bad habit, like always
not shaming ourselves.
Not shaming ourselves.
Yeah,
like,
because
I'm 200 pounds overweight. Let me laugh at myself.
Because shame is kind of written into like who we are. It's not about what we're doing. It has this element of like who we are. You know, guilt is sort of more about, I forget who said this, but it wasn't me first. I just want to be clear. I recognize it wasn't me first. Guilt is sort of more about what we did. You know, shame is like an identity thing.
But laughing at ourselves.
Yeah, like laughing at ourselves, like how ridiculous the human mind can be. I mean, let's face it, as brilliant as the nervous system and our minds and our bodies can be, they make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
I mean, we are a fallible species. We're not a perfect species, and perfection should never be the goal.